Imagine a world where it was believed the reason people were poor was because they were born that way. A world where your intelligence, status, power, and wealth were all considered solely a result of your DNA. In the 1970s, these were shared views of scientists and the general population when considering child development. These views may have stuck around for much longer if it weren't for a single psychologist. That psychologist was Yuri Bronfenbrenner. He developed his thinking to produce a theory that stood to explain and to understand child development as the interplay between an ecology of systems within that child's life. Allow me to introduce you to Yuri Bronfenbrenner's Ecological Systems Theory. Now, to explore this theory, we are going to use a framework of two similar neighbouring countries that have different cultural perspectives, Japan and Australia. Japan will be viewed through a collectivist Eastern cultural lens. Australia will be viewed through an individualist Western cultural lens. This will help us to better demonstrate the influence these differences in systems have on an individual. I will be referring to our Japanese female as Sakura and our Australian male as Sam. BronfenBrenner's ecological system divides a child's life in four major components, with the individual at the centre. First is the microsystem, with the most direct influence, followed by the mesosystem, the exosystem, and the macrosystem, with the most indirect influence. Firstly, the microsystem. This consists of influences closest to a person, such as their immediate family and school environment. Let's look at how differences in this system may affect an individual. In modern Australian households, a specific feature is of their typically two-generational nature, with only the parents and children living together. Studies have found this family structure has a positive impact on children's cognitive development. Whereas, in collectivist culture, it's more often to see a multi-generational household, which involves extended family living in the same household as their parents and children. This has been shown to have a positive impact on adolescents' academic performance. This exemplifies the nuance in differences in microsystems. Despite their differences, they both seem to have positive impacts on the individual, implying that there is no one right way to approach this. The mesosystem can be thought of as the interaction between the elements of the microsystem. For example, the interaction between a child's parents and their school life. Cultural similarities in the mesosystem involve the parents valuing engagement with their child's schooling. An example of a difference in the mesosystem of these two individuals is in the focus on performance and behaviour in the communication between teachers and parents. Sakura's performance and behaviour are always being monitored, whereas Sam has far more leeway in his behaviour and performance at school. Sam and Sakura's differences in the microsystem are then further amplified by their interaction in the mesosystem, where Sakura's environment closely monitors and fosters her intellectual development. Sam relies more on his intrinsic motivation to develop in this area. Now let's take a look at the exosystem. This refers to the individual's indirect social environment. This may consist of their extended family, who doesn't live with them, surrounding neighbourhood, and greater community. In Australia, Sam's connection between himself and people within his neighbourhood are more dependent on individual preference rather than through a goal of building community. This may be in part due to Australia being a more culturally diverse and individualist nation with differing values and beliefs among individuals. So, within this system, Sam is less likely to have a cohesive sense of community and as such, less obligation to be involved with his community, whereas Sakura has a greater potential of having a cohesive sense of community and her likelihood of being involved in her community is much larger. Finally, with the least direct influence is the macrosystem. This consists of the attitudes and ideologies of a culture. This may include religious beliefs, values, and social environment, which can all influence an individual's development. The culture that a child is raised in may influence their overall outlook on life. For example, how important is education? A difference in this system can be viewed in that Sam will be treated differently to Sakura if he was to lack formal education, due to the societal and cultural attitude towards the attainment of education. Another example is through the lens of attitudes toward personal goals. Sakura may have goals centered around her larger in-group's interest, which extends from her immediate family to the extended community. This would be reinforced by collectivist culture. Whereas for Sam, where individualism is more prevalent, placing greater importance on his own goals and personal interests would be more likely reinforced by his culture. Sakura may decide to direct her goals towards an outcome that serves the greater good of her community. Sam, however, may base his goals towards his own individual interest. Both of these would be equally reinforced by cultural influences. So as you can see, BronfenBrenner's Ecological Systems Theory is a comprehensive framework used to understand how an individual's environment is both interconnected and separate, while all influencing development either directly or indirectly. The four systems are all shaped and influenced by one another and demonstrate an authentic representation of an individual's personal, cultural, and social environment and the influence they have on individual development.